What if one of history's most feared names wasn't a demon at all? More than 3,000 years ago, entire kingdoms prayed to Baal, the mighty god of storms, rain, and fertility. But as civilizations rose and fell, Baal's image changed forever. A god once worshipped by nations would eventually become one of history's most controversial figures. Who was Baal really? A life-giving deity? Or the beginning of one of history's darkest legends? Let's uncover the truth.
Mention the name Baal today, and the mind immediately jumps to dark rituals, secretive cults, and the personification of evil. This fear is so visceral that in early 2026, synchronized protests broke out across Iran. Crowds gathered as massive effigies of a horned figure, alongside obelisks, were simultaneously set on fire in several major cities. A month later, the demonstrations spread. Here we see crowds in Baghdad, Iraq, where similar effigies were burned during annual Quds Day gatherings. This modern reaction is the result of a deliberate, millennia-long character assassination, a campaign that successfully overwrote a god's original identity. The dread surrounding Baal follows a specific historical arc, where religious and political rivals transformed a life-giving deity into the image of a monster. To find the real Baal, we have to look to the ancient Levant. Here we see the imposing columns of the Temple of Baalbek, which hint at the scale of this religion. In Northwest Semitic languages, Baal was originally a common title meaning owner or lord of a household. Over time, people applied this title to their most critical deity, the storm god Hadad. Eventually, the title became the name itself. Unlike Egypt with the Nile or Mesopotamia with its rivers, Canaanites lacked stable water systems. Their survival depended entirely on the weather. Thus, Baal became the rider of the clouds, bringer of rain, lightning, and wind, and the supreme source of agricultural life. When the dry summer hit, the crops withered. When the autumn storms returned, the land revived. The people didn't see a threat in those clouds. They saw a protector, rescuing them from starvation. For the ancient Canaanites, Baal was the literal difference between a thriving harvest and regional extinction. This protective role was woven directly into their mythology. Epic ancient texts describe Baal locked in violent battles against Yam, the chaotic sea, and Mot, the god of death. His mythological descent into the underworld and his return mirrored the cycle of the seasons, explaining the dry summers and the arrival of autumn rains. Yet for nearly 2,000 years, almost everything the modern world knew about Baal was written exclusively by his religious enemies. That changed when excavations at the ancient city of Ugarit unearthed texts and artifacts. This stone relief shows Baal exactly as his followers saw him, a powerful, heroic storm deity. In one hand, he wields a mace representing a thunderbolt, and in the other, a spear that blooms into a plant, connecting his storms to vegetation and growth. These discoveries finally allowed the Canaanites to speak for themselves, revealing a revered, life-giving hero instead of the villain described in later texts. As monotheism began to rise in the region, establishing a single, exclusive god meant eradicating the worship of rival local deities. The Hebrew Bible documents this conflict, most notably in the account of the prophet Elijah challenging and defeating the priests of Baal, a pivotal moment of cultural displacement. The campaign against Baal gained damaging ammunition from a distant regional offshoot. In the colony of Carthage, followers worshipped a variation called Baal Haman, and their rituals were far more extreme. Here at the archaeological site of Carthage, excavators unearthed the foundations of Taphets, open-air sanctuaries where bone fragments indicate children were sacrificed in desperate times. Rival monotheistic writers seized on these Carthaginian practices. They used the actions of this specific splinter group to paint all worship of any god named Baal as inherently demonic. By focusing on the practices of a distant cult, religious writers redefined their greatest theological rival into a symbol of shame. To complete the destruction of Baal's identity, ancient scholars employed a strategy of linguistic mockery, altering his very name in their texts. The honorable title was twisted into Beelzebub. Translated, this means Lord of the Flies, a deliberate insult to equate the once great storm god with filth and his followers with vermin. Centuries later, medieval demonology dictionaries finalized this transformation. This illustration from an 1863 occult text shows Beelzebub depicted as a grotesque, high-ranking demon of hell. Notice the visual details the artist used, like the skulls and crossbones etched directly onto the demon's wings. The Rainbringer had been replaced by a vector of pestilence. It illustrates how a god's identity is left at the mercy of those who seek to turn it into a boogeyman. This millennia-old fear is still being triggered today. In 2026, the Department of Justice released financial documents related to Jeffrey Epstein. In one file, an optical character recognition scanner misread a bank name, accidentally printing the word Baal. That mundane digital error instantly sparked a global panic online, with people claiming it proved the existence of elite satanic rituals. A deity whose primary role was ensuring the survival of the Levant was gradually obscured by centuries of religious and political rebranding. Baal's legacy shows how a name can survive long after its original meaning is lost, preserved by rivals specifically to serve as a personification of fear.